Amber, could we start at the very beginning? What's the first memory you have maybe of kicking a ball in Milford, County Donegal?
Well, I think the first memory I have is probably with my two brothers. When we were very, very young, we were always out the garden. Dad always had us, the three of us, out kicking ball. Probably more so Gaelic football at the start, even the really basic things. But between that and my cousins, who literally all live really, really close to me, every evening we were out in the garden until the parents called us home, whatever, until it was pitch black. And that's probably the earliest memories I have.
Amber, did you ever feel in any way different, when you were playing with the boys, playing with your dad and that? Was there girls among your cousins, or did you realize in any way, because there wouldn't have been a load of clubs that had teams for young girls up in
Mhm.
Donegal at that time, or anywhere else in Ireland for that matter?
Yeah, well, I think with the cousins, like there was a couple of girls that were involved, and I think with that, we were the ones that we did stay around then later on playing football. But after that, there, bar a couple in school, there was very, very few girls involved in the football. Like even at break times in school, like you literally could handpick maybe one or two of them that would have joined in. And I think that was the thing, that when we went then to play in the local club, there was only a couple of girls that played. And then obviously when they changed the rules, I think it used to be up until under 14 you could play with the boys team, but the year I was there they changed it to under 12s. And I thought that was a big letdown for me, because I really enjoyed playing with the boys, because you know I did quite well against the boys, but also it's that little bit more, they treat you like a boy, like they do, which was the best thing about it as well. But yeah, you could tell that there wasn't that many girls knocking around, it's fair to say.
Was that hard? Because I remember Carleen Grom Hansen, who plays for Barcelona in Norway. I remember talking to her about this, and she was playing with boys all the way up and that, and she kind of used to get annoyed on occasion that there weren't girls who were as interested in playing the sport as you were. Because like, even if there were girls who were interested in football, maybe it didn't extend to sticking on a pair of boots and joining a club and training twice a week. Because, and especially those of you who turned pro later on, then you were kind of obsessed with the game.
Yeah, I suppose the biggest thing, discrepancy I would have had with it, was that some girls didn't want to do it because of the fear of getting hurt. And I think that's where I always had the small little, like, you're not going to get hurt if you're just playing and you're enjoying it. Like, nobody's setting out their intention to hurt anybody, like even at that age. But every now and again, like getting a little kick did nobody any harm. Like, and I think until they got older, there's definitely friends I had who played football later on, who said now that they wish they had started earlier. They wish they hadn't have had that. Oh, the boys will just hurt me, and maybe that doesn't just come from them, maybe that comes from the parents as well. But I think that attitude is something that, for a while was there. It definitely wasn't as frequent as it might be now with younger people growing up now, that idea that they do, there's a lot of idea to separate boys and girls. Whereas for me, I think the best thing is young girls can play with young fellas, and I said all the way up. To me, I think it's the best thing, because it's where they'll learn the most.
Were they nice to you in the beginning? And did that change when they realized, the young fellas, how good a footballer you were? All of a sudden, were they starting to tackle you that little bit harder, or trying to trip you up or that?
Do you know what, I can distinctly remember when we used to play. um Bonagee was one of the teams we used to play, and there was a fella who played for Bonagee, and honestly, anytime we played them, honestly, he took me out every single game. And I mean, took me out, like took the legs underneath me. And but it's funny though, because I remember not even that long ago, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, that he tweeted somebody, and he made a comment about it. He goes, I used to try and take her out of it. He said, because I used to be running after her for the rest of the game. So this was my only way to try and slow her down. And it's funny, because in that mindset, I would never think at the time that's why he's doing it. I just thought, Jesus, he has a big problem with me. He's trying to kill me all the time. But in a way, Philip, I think those little things, they toughen you up a wee bit. Like that appreciation is there. And I think I definitely felt from the boys, 100%, I felt respected by them, because I also think that, they realized that wasn't just a girl wanting to play football. They realized I was a very good girl player that was able to keep up with them. And I think when you get that respect from them, I think it goes a long way.
Mm. It's amazing to hear all those years later that all of a sudden, when you're playing for the Ireland team and things are going well, and then you hear the other side of the story, because it is a mark of respect in a way if some lad is trying to clean you out and sort of put you in your place.
Mhm.
How big a part of your life was Gaelic football at that time? Because I'm assuming there was a lot more Gaelic footballers in the parish maybe than soccer players among the girls, was there?
Well, everybody that I played predominantly soccer with, we all played Gaelic together as well. I think with the girls as well, like the Gaelic started to kind of take center stage because Milford got a women's team, and with that, then the underage teams came because we had enough players underage to start it up. And I think that there, with that, as soon as you had that, more people kind of getting involved, that's when the interest grew, and that's when more people were coming and saying, Jesus, I want to get involved in that. And I think looking back now, I said it was the people that were turning up, at school in break times. It was the same girls who then, as soon as there was word there was a team starting, were the first to put their hands up. But then suddenly the news started to filter through, and then suddenly there's more girls joining in at break times at school because there was a local team. And I think with that, there was just it did grow. It really did grow at a really healthy rate, and it was something that you never expected at the time. But I think as soon as Milford got a Gaelic women's team, you know I think there was so much influence of Gaelic football, and like my family, like is a huge GAA family, that I was very, very lucky to be involved in that. But also, my dad was also very competitive in the sense of he didn't. Mum and dad never wanted me just to play one sport. They wanted me to get stuck in because they seen I enjoyed. Also I was heavily involved in athletics as well, and they loved that. And to be honest with you, and I found this later down the line, I think it was Kira Grant told me this, that the under 17 team that went to the World Cup, I think Dave Bell and Dave Connell talked afterwards, and they said that the GA players that they had in the squad were the fittest players they had in the team
Mm.
because the GA stood to them, and you could see that toughness was about them. And um, I think it goes a long way, and I think it's similar in the Irish team that we have now. There's a lot of the girls that very good players that have also a strong background in GA, so I definitely think they complement each other as well.
Mm. Do you find that there's a lot of transferable skills there, Amber? And one of the things I'm thinking about, especially when you were playing centre forward, if you're playing as the number 9 for Ireland, right? The way you distribute your weight, the way you hold somebody off and that kind of thing. I always found that when I was playing soccer, I had a huge benefit of having played
Mhm,
Gaelic football because you're
mhm,
waiting for that shoulder, you're waiting for that heavy
mhm,
challenge.
mhm.
And, when I came to playing football in Sweden, it was so easy because you were used to getting battered off the field by fellas in Dublin. Like,
Yeah, and I think that's something that, again, I think is very, very grateful for, because I do believe it really did toughen you up that way. And, not just, yeah, holding the ball up and holding players up, but even you know, when I got involved with county football, there was a very big influence on move the ball, move the ball, move the ball, give it and go, give it and go. And then suddenly then you get older, and in soccer, it's not like, right, I'm going to run the length of the pitch here and stick it in the net. Suddenly then you're playing with players who are good enough that you can give it go, and then suddenly you're creating these little small triangles and opportunities. But I think I would have learned that before in Gaelic rather than soccer, which is now it's all they talk about is the little triangles. Create triangles all over the pitch, pass and move the opposition and things like that. And I think you can see that they definitely do complement each other. And it's the same when you finish, like when you're going through on goal with Gaelic football, they always say hard and low, and it's the same in soccer. They say aim low to the bottom corner and you'll always score. So I think in terms of that, those skills are definitely transferable.
what kind of a Gaelic footballer were you? Because you mentioned the family influence there, and you're always going to have, your brothers and your mom and dad maybe on the sideline, this kind of thing, cheering you on. Were you very competitive? Were you fiery? Were you laid back? Were you, team first player? Were you a score first player?
I'd say probably, being completely honest, I probably was a score first player. I think when I got older playing with county, you realize it's not a one woman show, and I think you learn that the hard way. But also I think there was an expectation with me in the club that I was the scoring forward. I was the one that I was very reliable in that sense. Philip, regardless of what I do in my life, whether it's it could be a community games, it could be a charity run, I always take that competitive side into things, and that's something I'll never lose. I think as soon as I lose that is the day I need to stop getting involved in sport, because I think it's so important to have that little burning desire in your belly to win games and to be competitive and to win and make tackles, to make blocks, to score points, score goals, and that feeling of doing that is fantastic. But I think one thing that I took from my family, from dad, always said to us, about the importance of using both feet, kick with both feet, hand pass with both hands. And I think now that I would be quite comfortable on my left foot, even in soccer. Yes, it's not as good as my right, but I definitely think that I'm comfortable on it because from a young age it was drilled in, use both feet, use both feet. And like, you look at professional men's footballers, some of them can't use both feet very well. And it's just one of those things that I think I'm lucky to have that attribute with me.
I think the latest generation, or your generation of Gaelic footballers in particular, it was drummed into us from an early age. My dad always used to say to me that if you can only use one foot, you're only half a footballer. And,
Mhm.
it was almost like, shaming it, just take it with your left foot. It doesn't matter if, if it's, as you say, if it's not as strong. But in
Mhm.
doing that, rather than having to turn back onto your right foot the whole time, the chance might be gone, right? Now, you've hinted at it, hard and low into the corner. You've talked about your left foot there, right? I have to ask you about the goal against Scotland. And I'd like to start with your left foot. The first touch when you got that ball from Denise O'Sullivan, was that the best touch you've ever had in your professional career with your left foot? Because it just put you away with the goalkeeper.
I think, to be honest, Philip, it's the best touch I've ever had, regardless of foot. I think I can't, you know what, I can't say it was intentional because it wasn't intentional to be as good as it was. I can say that. If I, as long as it was getting in front of myself, I would have been happy. But when I look back on it now and be, critical of the goal, it was perfect because it got me behind the defender and it also got the ball out of my feet. And after that, then it's a foot race, and then I would always back myself in that situation.
It also got you on a line that the defender didn't have a clear path to the ball. And that often makes them switch off because in a couple of seconds, you're going to be in the penalty box. And that gives you, as the striker, then time. You did it hard and low. I think, and if there's one negative thing I can say, I think you've undersold this goal. I don't think you give yourself credit for how good it was, that touch and that finish. I've seen Marta do that loads of times for Brazil and here in Sweden as well. What were you thinking when you're taking that first touch and you go, hang on a second, I just put myself in here. It's 0-0. Scotland have missed a penalty. If I score this, we might be going to the World Cup. Or was it just, right, I've got to put this in the back of the net?
Yeah, like the first part you said, like that, none of that came into my head. I think since I've spoke about the goal, one thing I said is in my mind it did actually go quite blank. Bar our goalkeeping coach said to us on the build up to the game about their goalkeeper, and he said she's really hesitant to come off her line. And I think that's the only thought that crossed my mind is when the first touch came so well out in front. In my head, I was like, take another one, take it in again. And you can see when I take the second touch, she still hasn't begun to move. It's only when I take the second touch does she begin to move. And I think as soon as I seen her coming towards me, it's, another thing they always say to you in the striker, especially when you're going one-on-one with the keeper, don't wait till the keeper's set. The big toe now, that came out of nowhere. That was never an intention. And, it was I've done it in a friendly game here a few weeks ago and the ball went, nearly went out for a throw and it went that far away. But after that there, I think don't wait for the goalkeeper to get set. And they're just small little things. But you have to remember, Philip, this happened in a 2 or 3 second period. So I can't, say there was this unbelievable clear train of thought with it. The only thing I was thinking about was what Jan Willem had said to us during the week about their goalkeeper and taking that second touch in to get a wee bit closer to goal.
There's somebody once asked Alan Shearer what goes through your mind in a moment like that, and he said absolutely nothing. It's just you just do it. It's instinct. It's that thing. And yet, I'd imagine that the certain goals that you've scored, and even this one, you can remember absolutely everything about it. So there's some sort of process going on there. But in the moment after that, Amber, because I mean that was the most extraordinary part of it was that what had happened in Creasla. And did you feel any joy at that moment, or did you just feel that this was a moment of tribute to the people in your community that have been lost?
So Philip, one of the things I've said after the game and after the goal was, when you score a goal, there is an instant rush when the ball hits the back of net that you get it internally, and it's something I can't describe to you unless you've been in that position. Not just for an international game, but scoring a goal in any game. I get some games it's a small rush, and then other games, obviously in this magnitude, it's a little bit bigger. But the rush still came. But then as soon as I kind of wheeled away, it nearly just the switch went. And I think because subconsciously I'd always been thinking about, home and what had happened a few days earlier. And, even on the morning of the game, I was speaking to my mother and said, like, I don't have a mindset for an international playoff tonight. I know mum was like, you have to try and change that. And I think going into the game, I'm not saying in any way I wasn't focused on it, but I wasn't clear-minded, focused on one thing. Creasla was also in the back of my head as it would be expected to be. So yeah, it's not something that I was thinking of when I was running up to the ball. Oh, if you score, you have to dedicate this. I think it was nearly just a natural reaction to the moment. Because it's like I've said, it was a brilliant moment for me and for the team. but on the other side, there's a families in another place going through a horrendous time, and your mind sometimes just does that automatic switch, and in a way, I'm grateful it did as well.
The reaction to your reaction, so to speak, Amber, it was a great moment. It was kind of like when Kelly Harrington walked in, carrying the flag for Ireland at the Olympics, and the whole team bowed. And Jesus, even now, that just hits me right there, you know. And the same thing there, that everybody had a reaction to your reaction. Everybody felt that they were Amber Barrett, that they had, like, you know, a hotline to you. They felt that thing. Did that surprise you that, you know, there was such a big reaction to how you acted in that moment?
Yeah, I suppose, yeah. Because again, it's not something. For me, it was such a minor thing to do. Like, in terms of course, you recognize the armband, you recognize the significance of it, but you know, I was inundated, as you can imagine, with messages after the game, but the majority of them didn't, you know, were irrespective of the goal. You know, the majority of them came for the celebration itself, and then obviously then the interview with RT after. And it's funny how in those moments, you know, what Irish people really value. And I think, you know, my dad said to me that, I think a friend of his at work had mentioned, he said it was the poignancy and the eloquency of that moment, you know, when someone's just done something historical, that they can actually think about something else. But to be honest with you, Philip, I think that's exactly what our team epitomizes. You know, it's never it's a selfless thing that we do to play football, but you know, we do it every day because of not just us for now. We do it to clear paths for people in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And I think the fact that our team, and you know, I always talk about it after, but my reaction to the goal, and then you have Katie's reaction directly coming to me. And I can't emphasize how important that was for me afterwards to see that, because again, that's your team captain, that's your leader. And Katie has no, you know, connection to Donegal in terms of what happened up there or anything. But again, her moment wasn't right, let's, you know, big crazy celebration. It was just really calm and respect my reaction to it, and something like that there. You can't teach people that. That's just a natural leadership quality that she has, and it epitomizes our team as well.
It seemed to me like you were representing Creasa and Donegal, and Katie in that moment represented the rest of us in Ireland in being there with you. And it was one of the most powerful things I've ever seen in sport. What else is it, Amber, that makes this team? Who is this team? Because there's an awful lot of people, you know, for better or worse, who are only getting on the bandwagon of the girls in green now, despite all the great things that you've done and the near misses over the last few years. Now we're in the World Cup. How would you describe this team to somebody who's never seen them play before?
I think the most important thing I would say, first thing would be selfless. I said completely dedicated to a cause greater than their own. Hardworking, dedicated, trustworthy. They epitomize everything that it means to be. And it's kind of funny on International Women's Day that you asked me this question, because they are what I would say as such strong characters on and off the field. And not just, you know, with the snare that happened that week in Creasla, but there's been so many issues that have come up, personal issues with people, and they've just been absolutely brilliant. How they just, you know, it's just that little conversation, and even, do you know what? It's even sometimes they try and take a lightheartedness about something, and they just suddenly they put somebody at ease. I think when you ask any new player that's come into camp, you know, at the start of camp, you know, obviously the nerves, you're coming into camp, it's always a nervous experience, young or old, regardless. And at the end of it, you know, that's one thing they said. And Aoife Mannion said it to me last camp. She said, she goes, the girls are so welcoming. And she goes, they're just, you can see that they're just happy for you to be here. And there's no like egos of, oh, Jesus, she's here, she's going to take my place. There's none of that. It's just like, look, she's here, you're very welcome. We all get the same chance at training, and we're all going to go out and enjoy it. And I think that's what it is. And I have to as well comment, Philip, the intelligence. They are ferociously intelligent. Everybody has a level of intelligence that is all beyond the next person. Like, you know, you have a team of doctors there. Like, you have more than you have Harriet Scott is a doctor, Keir Grant is a doctor. I think Katie thinks sometimes she's a doctor, but she's not. But you have this huge level of intelligence, and it's so well reciprocated with the rest of us, because you're just learning from every single person that's beside you.
Is there a lot of crack in the camp? Because, there's previously Ireland would have been looked at, as, we're along for the ride, we're having a bit of gas and a few drinks here and there, a bit of a sing song and that kind of thing. Is there a lot of that? Or do you manage to strike a balance between that and the serious and complicated business of modern
Mm.
international football?
No, I think we've really, really have struck the balance, and I think we've got it absolutely down to a T. Um, and it's, I don't know if it's been publicly talked about a lot, but we played the night before we played Scotland. Obviously, you have I think Katie and Vera have to go for the last, the big
The press conference, yeah.
press conference and the interviews and all that there. So all that there. So anyway, we had to come to training, but things had been a little bit delayed. So we actually had to wait an extra, I think 15 to half an hour in the change room. So we're all waiting around, and next thing, I think it's Nifa, he says, right, we'll get put a bin on that end, and we'll line up on either side facing someone. We're going to header the ball over and back, try and get it in the bin. This is on the eve of arguably the biggest game in Irish women's football. And honestly, if you'd have been standing outside, you would have thought that there was a party going on, because we were just in raptures, the noise, the atmosphere, the intensity of, because we got it a couple of times really, really close. And you're talking like 20, 25 players headering the ball over and back to get it into this small little bin. And honestly, after that there, I don't think there was a doubt in anybody's mind that we were going to win the next day, because, you know, and Vera always says that training we did in Hampden Park was the best training we've done. And that was what was happening 20 minutes before. So we know how to strike the balance. We know how to, yeah, we're focused, we're ready. But here, look, we've just had a bit of a laugh, we've had a bit of crack, and we've managed to turn it. And I honestly think it's one of the reasons why we've been really successful.
You mentioned, I was going to say Katie Taylor. You mentioned Katie McCabe. Now she'd kill me for saying that. She's one of the leaders in the team, the most obvious leader in the team. Really slick media performer, brilliant when she goes up at the press conferences, says all the right things. But you can't have a football team with somewhere between 23 and 26 players in it and only have one leader. Who would you point to as the other leaders in the dressing room? And what's your own role in that? Are you there to lead the younger girls, or are you there to sort of to have a quiet word in somebody's ear, or to lead by example?
I suppose like the leader question comes in all different ways. Like I think you have your standouts, you have your Diane Caldwells, Louise Quinns, Katie McCabe's, Denise O'Sullivan's. I think you ultimately look at them, Niamh Fahey as well. You look at them players, like they're the players that ultimately they're the names on everybody's lips when it comes to leaders. But I think recently I would definitely have to also put Courtney Brosnan in that bracket. And I don't think, off the field, Courtney's not the player that's rounding everybody up and getting everybody into the bus on time. But her performances are leadership quality. She's known in the Scotland game, she knew exactly when to start killing that time, and she done it perfectly, enough to not get booked, but enough to kill the momentum every time Scotland built. And that is leadership qualities. You have Anya O'Gorman as well, who's 100 and plus caps now, and there's just again all different ways of being leaders. I think in a personal way, I think I would also see myself as a leader in a different way. Obviously when we're in training, we usually do the starting 11 versus the team, the subs team. And I think that in that instance, when I'm not playing, I would like to really say to the guys, look, we're not in the 11, but we're going to make sure in this training that we do it so well. The Vera's like, Jesus, I have to have a look at some of them girls because they've made such a marker. And I think another thing I take pride in is that I try and I think always welcome anybody that's come in for the first time, and put them at ease, and no, there's no stupid questions. If you need anything asked, there's loads of people that are willing to help. But I'm not just the only one. There's a lot of players that I would also point in that. But to be honest with you, I think everybody has some form of leadership quality. We have some of them that have to be loud and proud. We also have the little quiet leaders who just go about their business effectively. I think Harriet Scott's a prime example of that. She's just always consistently good. Same with Jamie Finn, always consistently good. And then you've Heather Payne, who's she's not a loud person, but you see her work rate. And for me, that sets the standard of everybody, because I'm like, Heather's after running 12.5K. That's what, if you're going to do that role, this is what Heather does. You have to do equally. And for me, from my position, I look at Heather in that sense of, I really need to push myself to get to that level, because that's what's expected. But there's so many. Honestly, Philip, we're inundated with leaders, to be honest with you.
Heather's absolutely phenomenal. I get tired just watching her play football because like she just runs and never stops. And you know, a player, you look at something and you go, that's a hopeless case there. And by Jesus, she'll either get it or she'll almost get it, you know. Karen Duggan, I think the other day was saying that she'd like to see a sort of a slightly more tactically expansive Ireland. I'm not 100% sure I'd agree with her after seeing the games against Sweden, both here in Sweden, in Gothenburg that time, and in Dublin. How hard is it to strike a balance now? Because we're going up against the Olympic champions in Canada, the host nations of Australia, extremely strong Nigeria side. What's the mood in the camp now? Do you want to get the ball down, play it, or are we going to have to be as compact and as organised as we have been in qualifying?
Well, I think ultimately, Philip, one of the things we had to go back to, we went on a run of losing 7 or 8 games in a row. And I think ultimately we just had to go back to being defensively solid. And I think we spent a little bit of time on getting that compactness back, getting that being difficult to play against, being difficult to break down side of us that we had. And we probably lost a wee bit of it in those games because confidence and everything, because it's a natural thing. Suddenly we get it back, and I think it was you that done the article that said it was the first game in 11 years that Sweden had dropped points at home.
That's correct.
And you know, yes, we had the free kick, but we also had a couple of other opportunities where we caught them on the break, where, we could have got something else out of it. Yes, of course, it was a backs against the wall. But when we're defensively solid, the rest of it is really possible. And I think, at the same time, when you've got something that's got you this far and it's worked so well, do we necessarily need to change it? Not so drastically, but I know Vera's always trying to build on it. And like the last camp that we had there, we spent a lot of time trying to work on that mid to attacking frame that, we're trying to improve it all the time because we know, you know, as we said against Scotland, Vera said, we're only going to need 1 or 2 chances. But, if you get 5 or 6, your chances of winning are that little bit more increased because you've created more. And the thing is, we have the quality of players to do it. So I think it is just a matter of time before everything comes together in that regard.
The ball, of course, that Denise O'Sullivan played to you for that goal against Scotland was one of those perfect things where the two of you seem to be on exactly the same wavelength. Is that the way throughout the team now, that when Katie McCabe gets the ball, do you have to think or can you just go? Do you know what's going to happen with her, with Heather, with Denise, with the creative players when they get on the ball? Or do you find yourself having to check your run a little bit and saying, I don't know what she's going to do here?
No, I think everybody's definitely on the same page. And I think that any player that plays in that position, especially the forward role, Vera has it very well drilled into what she wants. And she also has it drilled into the likes of Katie. When Katie gets the ball in those positions, what does she want Katie to do? And with that, then that means that, okay, Amber has to be in the right position. So there's been times, of course, in games when Katie's played a brilliant ball up the line and maybe Heather's not reacted to it because maybe Heather was on a different wavelength. That's natural, that's football. But I think in general, I would be fairly confident if me and Vera sat down tonight and talked about the role of the centre back, I'd be able to tell her because we've all sat through the meetings, we've all sat through the detail that's gone on, and I think in that regard, everybody is singing off the same hymn sheet.
There's a huge apparatus around a women's World Cup, right? They have, a media day a few weeks beforehand. You all get your pictures taken and that kind of thing. And all these things are thrown up in the TV broadcast. You do social media stuff in the bank for FIFA, this kind of thing. Are you all prepared for that? Have you all spoken to, the girls that you play with in Germany or the girls that maybe Katie plays with, Stina Blackstenius at Arsenal? Do you know what's waiting for you now? If you're in the squad and you get to Australia, do you know what's waiting around the corner, Amber?
Well, Gareth has tried to have that conversation with us. He's tried to, emphasize what's going on. And I think we haven't really taken it fully on board yet because, of course, the closer to the time it gets, it's going to be absolutely bedlam. Personally, I haven't had those discussions with anybody about what to expect. I'm sure Katie and those that have played are playing or played with players that, have experienced a World Cup, what it's going to be like. But yeah, I think it's going to be one of those experiences that you just until you're there, it's just going to hit you like a ton of bricks. Like really, it is because again, 32 countries in the world are going to be in this one place for a major tournament, and I still sometimes feel up the fact that Ireland's there. It's just an unbelievable thing to be able to say out loud.
Is it something you can look forward to, Amber? And again, nobody's saying that this player's going to be in the squad or this player's not going to be in the squad, but those who got us there are likely to be there. Is it something that you can look forward to, or is there a certain amount of trepidation just because we haven't been there before?
I think you can look forward to it. I think it's definitely still a case of, we still have a lot of football personally to play, like, with our leagues and everything. Like, most of us don't finish until the end of May. So, like, we're still going to have that in the back of our minds, that we have to be focusing on the club football, that situation that we're in now. But I think, Philip, if you're not thinking of Australia in June and July, I think, you probably shouldn't be putting yourself in, because I think even people playing that haven't been called into the team, should be having it on their mindset, because this is, 23 to 26 players are going to have the opportunity to represent Ireland in the World Cup. And I think everybody in Ireland will want to be one of those 26, young and old. So I think in that regard, you have to enjoy it. You have to enjoy the build up. You have to enjoy the work you're doing now for it. You have to enjoy maybe the extra runs, the extra sessions you're doing to get yourself ready for it. And then just seeing where it goes in the summer. And yeah, it's something you have to be looking forward to.
What do you expect the reaction to be? Because we've seen over the last few years, I remember talking to Pia Sundhage in 2019, just before the World Cup in France. And I asked her if this was going to be a sort of a watershed moment for women's football. And she said, if I had a fiver for every time I thought it was going to be a watershed moment for women's football, she said, I'd have a good bit of money saved up by now. But now we've seen England win the Euros. We've seen a huge amount of people, even in Ireland, when we went at the women's Euros, watching it. I've never had as many people contacting me on social media. I'm sure the same was for you. What do you expect Ireland to be like? Do you expect it to be like Italia 90, USA 94, when we were at the World Cup in 2002, the Euros in 2016? Is there going to be the same buzz about it? Has women's football really broken through now, Amber?
Well, I think it's going to be difficult to compare it to something like the World Cups you've just mentioned, and I think we're definitely on the right path. We're definitely, complete, always pushing the boundaries, and more and more and more people are getting interested and following. And I think you look at the success of the Scotland game. I think there definitely has been a really positive increase in support and interest for that. I think there will be a buzz. I think the buzz will be, it'll be firmly set in Ireland, because again, if anybody has anything to get interested in right now, women's sport is the best thing, because it's just going to keep getting better and better. And I think between now and then, we know we have a couple of very, very exciting games coming up. I think we have 5 games before we fly, and 2 of them are going to be in Dublin. And, I'm confident that we'd be able to sell out Tala for the 2 games. That would be the aim. And I hope that's what happens, because that would really, I think that would set the ball in motion, and that really would get the support train going as well.
August 20th, I think, is the final down below in Australia. If I was to call you on August 21st, what would success be for Ireland at this World Cup? Are we a success, which I partially believe, just because we qualified for the first time? Or what do you and the girls and the team and Vera and everybody around you want to achieve there?
Well, I hope if you're calling me on August 21st, Philip, I have a horrendous hangover, that would be a very nice way to start it. But I think in general, I think ultimately the first goal that we have is to get over the first game against Australia, because that is going to be, it's going to be ferociously difficult. It's the home nation in now a doubled capacity stadium with 82,000 people, and it's, very confident it's going to sell out. And then after that, I think, we're confident, we're Irish, we're always going to have the underdog tag. I think ultimately we want to get ourselves out of the group. And then after that, there, you have to just take it one game at a time. And I think if you look at the recent World Cup with the men's, nobody would have said Morocco would be getting to a semi-final. Nobody would have put them down. And do you know what? In it's competitive football, and it's also pressure football. World Cups are pressure games. And I think with that, anything's possible.
Amber, it's an absolute pleasure and an honor, and I can't wait to be following you this summer down below in Australia and New Zealand. But for now, thanks so much for talking to me, and on International Women's Day, no less.
Thanks very much, Philip. Always a pleasure.